Some people are born surrounded by gold, but only find meaning in life after hearing a cry coming from the cold floor of a locker room. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Light rain in the city, heavy traffic, and Mr. Octavio, yes, that Octavio, the owner of the most luxurious gym chain in the state, decided to stop by the South's own location, a rare occurrence. But something pulled him to that day. He entered silently, suit immaculate, shoes so polished they reflected the floor. He gave a discreet nod and walked straight to his office. But on the way, he stopped. Stopped like someone hearing what no one else can. Is that crying? He murmured. The sound came from the back, way in the back, near the women's locker room, where no one should be at that hour. He went alone. No one dared follow. And when he opened the door, oh, my friend, the world flipped. In the corner, between a bench and an old locker, there was a baby, wrapped in a thin cloth, red cheeks from the cold, eyes full of tears, alone, abandoned, inside the locker room of his own gym. My God, someone left a baby here, he said, more shocked than angry. But what no one expected was that the baby hadn't been forgotten. He had been hidden. And what happened next? My friend, if you're the kind who loves a good story with jaw-dropping twists, hit that like button and subscribe, because this one will tie your throat in knots and warm your heart. And let me tell you, when a millionaire finds a baby in a locker room, money becomes the least important thing, because that baby carried a secret in his blood. And the mother, she was closer than he ever imagined, much closer. Want to know who she was? Hold on, this is just the beginning. Octavio stood still, as if time had frozen around him. The baby sobbed softly, like someone who had cried so much there was only exhaustion left. The man, millionaire, proud, owner of it all, didn't know what to do with this little bundle of life weighing less than 5 kilos in the middle of his gym. Is someone playing a prank on me? He murmured, voice shakier than he wanted to admit. He didn't call security, nor the manager. He picked up the baby with a gentleness he didn't know he still had. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something no money could buy. A fear from within, a fear of facing something greater than himself. He carried the baby to the front desk, but before leaving the locker room, he noticed something on the floor. A crumpled note, scribbled in simple handwriting. Just one phrase. He's not to blame for anything. Forgive me. Octavio swallowed hard, and that's when chaos began. The manager was called, staff too, police. A woman screamed, another fainted. Everyone wanted answers. Who had done this? How had no one seen anything? The gym had cameras, badges, logs, everything. But the scariest part was that the records for that day showed no woman entered with a baby. The mystery was bigger than it seemed, and Octavio's look was no longer one of indignation. It was full of unanswered questions. What if she's still inside? He whispered just then. A staff member curled up behind the reception desk. She was new, quiet, petite, dressed in a cleaning uniform, and she was crying. Octavio stared. Her eyes trembled. What's your name? He asked Dot, and with a faltering voice, she answered, Louisa. That's when the real drama began. Her name hit the air like a stone tossed into a calm lake. Louisa. No one knew much about her. She was new, arrived early, left late, always worked with her head down. One of those people who clean everything and remain unseen, invisible. But in that moment, everyone saw her. Octavio took a step toward her, just one. But it was enough for Louisa to back away as if punched. Her hands trembled, her face pale, her gaze pleading for help, but without a voice to ask, do you know this baby? He asked, firm but not aggressive. She didn't answer, looked to the side, then to the floor. Her eyes filled with tears, but her mouth stayed shut. One tear fell, just one, and in that instant, Octavio knew the answer was yes. But Louisa shook her head. No, no, he's not mine. He's not. She kept repeating, like a broken record, trying to convince herself more than anyone else. The manager approached, the security guard too, but Octavio raised his hand and ordered everyone to stop. Nobody touches her. It wasn't pity. It was instinct, and Octavio always trusted what his gut told him before his brain. And right now, his gut screamed, there's more to this. Louisa finally lifted her face. There was something in her eyes that hurt, a mix of shame, despair, and love, but the kind of love that feels forbidden. You know, The kind the whole world says you're not allowed to feel. Please, let me go, she begged. You're not going anywhere until you tell me who that baby is. I can't say. Then you are the mother. She didn't respond. But in that silence, Octavio heard the loudest confession of all. The manager, more nervous than helpful, whispered, Mr. Octavio, she was hired months ago. Nobody knew anything about her life. No references, just showed up asking for work. He turned, and you gave it to her. She begged, said it was urgent, that she needed it. And, well, we were short-staffed too, and no one suspected she was pregnant. We never saw a belly, never suspected. She wore loose uniforms. Octavio fell silent for a few seconds. The baby, now in the receptionist's arms, slept a heavy, innocent sleep, and that hurt. Hurt a man used to signing million-dollar deals, but who had never held a child of his own. You didn't leave him here by accident, did you? Octavio asked. Still facing away, Louisa began to cry, soundless, just tears. He wasn't supposed to be found by anyone else, only by you, by me, because you are the father. The floor seemed to vanish. The manager's eyes widened. The security guard stepped back, and Octavio said nothing, but inside, everything was screaming. That's not possible. But deep down, way down, he knew it was. Octavio stood frozen, like he'd turned to stone in the middle of the reception. Only his eyes moved, darting back and forth, trying to process what he'd just heard. This was a bomb, and the kind that doesn't explode outward, it explodes inside. Louisa, the cleaning lady, saying the baby was his. Are you crazy? He said, but not angrily. It was more disbelief, like hearing a phrase from a language he didn't speak. She tried to speak, but her throat wouldn't let her. Her voice drowned in sobs. You're telling me that baby is my son? Yes, sir, she replied, finally, her eyes fixed on the floor. And I can prove it. Silence. The gym, once filled with loud music, clanging weights and chatter, now echoed only a thick silence. Heavy air. That's a serious accusation, the manager muttered, barely breathing. What Sirius is hiding a child from his father for almost a year? Louisa shot back. Octavio couldn't speak, but his mind went back to the past. Was the only way to understand this absurd present, and it was like unlocking a door that had long been sealed. Behind it, a name, Luciana, a business trip, a hotel in Recife, a night when boredom, whiskey, and ego walked hand in hand, and a maid who seemed shy, but had eyes that carried stories. Her name, Louisa, but back then, she wore a badge with a different last name, different ID, different life. Octavio sat down. His heart beat differently now, because suddenly, the face of the cleaning lady made sense. He'd seen it before. In the mirror of regret, in the face of omission. I tried to reach you. I called your office, sent letters, emails, but you never answered. Then I found out they changed all your contacts. She pulled a folded sheet from her bag, a DNA test, old, crumpled, but the ink still screamed the truth. I did it with your hair, took it from a towel, last time, from the hotel room. The lab was expensive, but it confirmed. Octavio took the paper, read it again, and stayed silent. It was him. The test showed more than words. It revealed a truth no money could bury. So why now? Why leave him like this? He asked, still unable to look her in the eye. Because I knew if I knocked on your door as a cleaning lady, you'd never hear me. But if it was your child, then you'd listen. Octavio looked at the baby, now awake, eyes wide open, and for a moment, he saw his own eyes reflected back. My God, he has my eyes. He does. And your blood, but he doesn't need your contempt to. Those words hit hard, harder than any scandal Octavio had ever faced in his life. But the worst was yet to come, because Louisa hadn't told everything. The most painful part was still hidden, the part that involved another name from his family. The test was still in Octavio's hand, but the paper trembled, or maybe it was his hand, no longer steady enough to hold so much truth. The gym manager, now pale-faced, excused herself and ran to the phone. I'm calling the police. This is getting serious. But Louisa stepped forward. Don't call anyone, because if this becomes a police matter, it won't just be me going down. Big names will fall too. Her words echoed. Like a prophecy, Octavio stood up slowly, walked over to Louisa and spoke low, firm, What are you talking about? Who else is involved? She took a deep breath. Her tears had dried. Now only raw courage shone on her face. You want to know why I disappeared? Why I never asked for child support, or media attention, or a scandal? I do, and I also want to know why you showed up now. Because now, your brother is about to take over the presidency of the company. Octavio froze. What does my brother have to do with this? He knew. Silence. What do you mean? He knew. He knew I existed, knew the baby was yours, knew everything, and paid me to stay silent. Octavio's eyes widened. His once sober face turned dark. Are you saying Mauricio? He found me after the DNA test, gave me money, a lot, to disappear, said you couldn't be a father, that it would ruin your image, and that if I said anything, I'd pay a heavy price. Louisa opened her bag again, pulled out a worn envelope. Inside, crumpled 200 real bills, stained, along with a handwritten letter, signed with initials. That left no doubt. MC, you want me to give this to the police, she asked, or to the press? Octavio took the letter, read slowly. The handwriting was unmistakably his brother's. He recognized even the crooked way he wrote the letter. I had no idea. Well, now you do, and now you have a choice to make. Outside, another employee had already called the police. They arrived slowly, lights flashing. Octavio looked at the baby, now in Louisa's arms, head resting on her chest. Asleep again, as if the world wasn't falling apart around him. If I confirm this story, my family name goes in the trash. And if you don't, your son's name will never exist. Outside, heavy footsteps, uniforms, voices saying, "Excuse us, sir." Octavio had only seconds to decide. Protect the empire, or acknowledge the heir and the problem. Gabby, is that justice never knocks alone, because walking in with the police was his very own brother. Asterisk Mauricio entered with his usual arrogance. Sharp suit, expensive cologne, that smug smile of someone who thinks he's already won before the game even starts. But the moment he saw Louisa, then the baby, and finally the letter in Octavio's hands, his face fell apart. "What's this?" he asked, trying to fake surprise. "You tell me, Mauricio, you wrote it." Mauricio chuckled, one of those short, fake laughs from the corner of the mouth. "Oh, please, Octavio, you're going to believe this." Woman, Louisa, held her son tighter, like shielding him from an invisible blow. "This woman has a name. You hear?" she said, encouraged. "Way more than you." The officer at the reception approached. "Sir, we received a report of child abandonment." Mauricio, cutting. "It's a misunderstanding. The lady here has a history of instability. You can check. She barely has proper documents. A gold digger." Octavio interrupted with a deep voice. "She's the mother of my child." The world froze. Mauricio tried to laugh again, but his lips didn't move. "Are you insane? You didn't even know this kid existed until this morning, and now I do. At worst, now I know about you, too." Louisa, quietly crying, handed the envelope of money to the officer. The agent, upon seeing the bills, asked, "Was this money given to silence you?" "Yes," she answered. "By this man?" he asked, pointing to Octavio. She shook her head. "No, his brother." Mauricio stepped back twice, his face ghostly white. "This is absurd. This is slander. You're ruining the family over some twisted story." Octavio stepped closer. Eyes red. The family was already ruined. "Mauricio, I just pulled the cover off the dirt." The officer looked at both of them, let out a deep sigh. "We'll need you to come with us. It's best to handle this officially." Octavio held the baby. For the first time, without fear, without doubt, a warmth rose in his chest, like that tiny body had melted years of coldness. But in his soul came collapse, because his brother was no longer a brother, and Louisa, who he had erased from memory, was now the mirror of a mistake he swore he'd never make. "I don't know what to do," Octavio murmured, voice nearly childlike. "Then do what you've never done." Louisa said, "Stay." And he stayed, but stayed alone, because after leaving the police station, after giving her statement, Louisa had disappeared with the baby. No warning, no note, no trace, and once again, Octavio was left with silence. But this time, the silence hurt so much more. Octavio paced in circles inside his own apartment, a place of marble, glass, and a high-rise view, but cold, cold on the outside and the inside. It had been 3 days without proper sleep, his face worn, his eyes lost. Louisa had vanished. Even the police station had no clue. She gave her statement and disappeared like a shadow. Took the child with her, left no number, no address, no trail, just a silence that hurt. Octavio, a man of perfect routines, scheduled meetings, and millions flowing through his accounts, now missed appointments, skipped commitments. At worst, he looked at the crib he had hastily set up in the guest room, emptied out on impulse. He drove to the South Zone gym, the same one where it all began. He went up to the locker room, sat on the cold bench, and there he cried, but not just any cry. It was the kind locked up, built over years, as if that baby had pulled a hidden string, unraveling everything inside. The new janitor recognized him. "Sir, are you okay? Did you know Louisa?" he asked, wiping his face. "Yes, she used to leave the baby with an older lady who lives nearby. When she couldn't, she brought him in secretly. She said she just needed 1 more month, that she could afford daycare." The employee pointed to a locker. Inside, there was a forgotten cardboard box. It held a tiny onesie, a pacifier, a pack of diapers, and on top, a blue teddy bear that smelled like baby powder. Octavio picked up the bear like someone holding the last remnant of a dream, and in that moment, something inside him broke. But from the pieces, a new will was born, not to protect an empire, but to find the only real part of life he'd ever had. A few days later, the janitor returned with an envelope that had been forgotten inside Louisa's locker. Inside, there was an old photo. It was Louisa, holding the baby in her arms, sitting on a park bench. On the back of the picture, a handwritten address. Octavio didn't think twice. He grabbed his car keys and drove there. It was a simple home in a quiet neighborhood where time seemed to move slower. He knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, a face marked by time, but gentle eyes. "Louisa?" he asked, with a voice balancing fear and hope. The old lady hesitated. "She was here, yes, but she left yesterday. Said she needed to disappear again." "Disappear where?" "She said you'd understand, that if you really looked, you'd know where to find her." He stood at the gate, unsure if that was a clue or a punishment. But then the woman handed him something. She left this. It was a small box. Inside, a cocaine shaped like a heart, and a note. "Go back to where you first saw me." Octavio closed his eyes. His heart pounded, because he knew exactly what that meant. Or ECIFE. The city where everything had started. The night he thought he was just having fun, but had actually created life. And that's where he would go. The flight to Recife was long, but Octavio barely noticed. Sitting by the window, he didn't read, eat, or nap. He just stared at the sky, searching up there for answers that never seemed to come from down here. He carried only a small bag, not filled with clothes, but with anxiety, shame, and hope. When he arrived, he took a deep breath in front of the same hotel where, years ago, he'd made a mistake he believed long buried. The place hadn't changed much, but he had. It was a different man who walked through the lobby, up the stairs, and then back down again, led by an impulse without logic or plan. He didn't go to the room. He went to the beach stop barefoot. The sand burned his feet, but he didn't feel it. The breeze brought the scent of salt, ocean, and nostalgia. Then he saw her. Louisa, sitting on a stone bench, the baby sleeping in her arms, her eyes on the sea, as if in conversation with it. Octavio stopped, watched from a distance for a few minutes. He didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't wait any longer either. He walked slowly toward her, each step sinking into the sand, as if weighed down by all the things he had denied. She turned her face. Their eyes met, and for long seconds, no words, just gazes saying, "Everything, you came." She whispered, "I came because I had to, because I couldn't live without trying to make this right." She gestured for him to sit beside her. "Why here?" he asked, trying to hold back emotion. "Because this is where it all began. The place where you saw me as a woman for the first time, and then erased me like I never existed." Silence, only the sound of the waves beating like a giant heart. "I don't want to erase anything anymore," he said. "I want to remember, and I want to be here." The baby opened his eyes, reached out, grabbed his father's finger, and that's when Octavio broke. Not from guilt, but from love. For the first time, real love. Pure. No contract, no filter. And in that simple gesture, a new life began. 2 days later, Octavio sat in a modest notary office in downtown Recife. The walls were peeling, the fan turned slowly, and the air smelled of old paper. In front of him, Luisa held Miguel, and the notary, skeptical, asked, "Do you truly wish to legally acknowledge this child as your son?" Octavio didn't hesitate. "I do, and it's the first true wish of my life." He signed. Name, Miguel D. Costa Silveira. His surname, a public acknowledgement, the formalization of what his heart had been shouting for days. On the way out, there were no reporters, no crowd, no applause, but there was peace. A peace Octavio had never known before, and that's what he wanted. That same day, he called a press conference. This time, by his own will. He appeared without a suit, without PR makeup, without a scripted speech. Just him, wearing a light shirt, face tired, but with eyes finally alive. He told everything. The night, the woman, the child, the silence, the mistake, the choice, the courage. "I am a father. I was absent, but I won't be anymore." The headlines spread fast. Half the internet called him crazy. The other half called him a man. Mauricio tried to fight back, accused Luisa of being an opportunist, tried to flip the story. But Octavio had already won, not over his brother, but over himself. He requested to step down from the company, said his focus had shifted. Diapers, bottles, vaccines, sleepless nights, because Octavio had understood, late but in time, that raising a child is the only presidency that truly matters. And that night, Miguel slept in a new crib, in a new home, with his father by his side. No promises of perfection, but with one certainty, he would never be alone again. Octavio was no longer the same man who used to storm down hallways with a phone glued to his ear and a leather briefcase in hand. Now he walked slower, observed more, listened more, and, for the first time, learned to say a name out loud without shame, fear, or calculation. "My son." Miguel grew fast. He laughed easily and had eyes that seemed to read the world. When he saw his father walk into the room, he'd wave his little hands in the air as if saying, "You came back," and that melted any hardness still left in Octavio. One night, Miguel had a fever, the kind that terrifies parents. Luisa rushed into the room, panicked, but found Octavio already on his knees beside the crib, pressing the damp cloth to his son's forehead. She didn't say a word, just sat next to him. They stayed like that, the baby in the middle, and the most beautiful silence of all. After the fever passed, Luisa looked at him and said, "You're learning." Octavio smiled. "I'm trying. And for the first time, I really want to learn." The next day, he did something unthinkable. He went to visit his mother, a stern, cold woman who had always raised him with tight reins and sky-high expectations. He introduced Miguel and said, firmly, "This is your grandson, and he will not grow up ashamed of his own name." The woman cried for the first time, and Miguel, with the wisdom only babies have, touched her face gently with his tiny hand, as if to say, "Grandma can change too." Mauricio desperately tried to maintain appearances. He kept attending events, giving hollow interviews, smiling with his teeth but with no soul behind them. Octavio's withdrawal had shaken the company. Partners grew suspicious. Investors backed off, and soon the cracks began to show. Old messages surfaced, voice recordings. The letter Luisa had handed to the police leaked online, and, in one of life's poetic ironies, the empire he'd tried so hard to protect by force collapsed under the tide of truth. An internal audit exposed ghost contracts, data manipulation, and personal favoritism. Mauricio was suspended indefinitely. Octavio, from his modest corner of the world, simply said, "What's built on lies doesn't survive the wind." But he didn't celebrate the fall. He felt sorrow, because deep down, Mauricio was still his brother, and his downfall was a wound in their family tree. Even so, Octavio didn't call, didn't search, didn't retaliate. He chose instead to care for what was born pure, not to avenge what had rotted from within. Over time, Octavio began visiting shelters. He met children who, like Miguel, had almost become invisible. He spoke with social workers, listened to the stories of women like Luisa, silenced by shame, fear, or lack of options. So he decided to act. He sold part of his company's shares, took the money and created a social project, Strong Cradle, a haven for single mothers, with daycare, legal assistance, therapy, and technical education. A place where no woman had to abandon her child for lack of alternatives, where no child had to wait for a father who never came. Louisa was invited to run it. She said she wasn't. Sure she could. Octavio replied, "You survived loneliness, blackmail, rejection. Of course you can, and now you'll help others do the same." And she did, and she shined. Miguel, now a bit older, ran through the project's halls like a mascot. He knew all the caregivers' names, the babies, the kittens that showed up at the windows. And Octavio, there, among diapers and giggles, learned something no business school had ever taught him. Dignity is born within, but it needs opportunity to grow. Sunday morning, sunlight filtered through the living room curtains, drawing golden stripes on the floor, as if the day itself wanted to witness that moment. Miguel, now 5 years old, ran barefoot through the house, his shirt stained with paint and a crumpled paper in his hand. Dad, look what I made for you." Octavio, who was resting in a hammock reading an old Machado de Assis book, dropped everything at the sound of his son's voice. He smiled. That joyful running around the house was music, and that shout was a kind of prayer only a father can understand. Miguel handed over the paper carefully. It was a drawing, simple, childish, messy, but everything was there. A big stick figure with open arms holding a smaller one. Above them, a smiling sun, and below, written in shaky letters, "Dad and me, together forever." Octavio felt his throat tighten. His heart nodded. He sat on the floor beside his son and held the drawing like it was a piece of his soul. "You know this is the best gift of my life, right?" he said. Voice trembling. Miguel nodded and hugged him tightly. That hug wasn't just from a child. It was one of belonging, of healing. Octavio stood up, went to his room, and opened an old box. Inside were the first memories he kept since the day Miguel came into his life. The pacifier left in the locker room, the crumpled DNA test, the photograph with the recipe, address, the teddy bear that smelled like baby powder, and now, the drawing. That same day, he made a decision. He called his lawyer, voice firm and sure. "I want to change my will. I want everything I own, shares, properties, rights to, go to Miguel. But more than that, I want him to inherit my name with pride, and my story with honesty. Everything, Mr. Octavio, everything. Even what I haven't achieved yet." That evening, while his son napped on the couch with the drawing on his chest, Octavio sat beside him and just watched. That innocent face, peaceful breathing. And he thought, how many rich men would give everything to have this, and never will? On Monday, he handed over the keys to his luxurious apartment and moved into a simpler house with a backyard, a yucca tree, a hammock on the porch, and neighbors who smelled like fresh coffee. There, luxury gave way to what truly mattered, because he understood what makes a man great isn't the roof he sleeps under, it's the ground he walks on with truth. 7 years had passed. Miguel was now a sharp, confident, curious young boy. He loved books, ran barefoot through the house, climbed trees, helped his mother in the kitchen, and called his father my real-life hero. No cape, no fantasy. A true hero. Octavio aged with dignity. His hair had grayed. His steps had slowed, but his smile, that was the smile of a complete man. A man who had lost everything superficial and, in return, gained everything that was true. The Strong Cradle project now had 3 active locations in different neighborhoods. It welcomed young mothers, orphans, victims of violence, women the world had discarded who now found a chance to start over. Louisa was the general coordinator. She had studied, earned her degree in education, taken courses, written articles. She was invited to give lectures at universities, and in every one of them, she began by saying, "I'm not an example of overcoming. I'm proof that no one overcomes anything alone. I only survived because someone chose to see me when I was invisible." At one of those events, Octavio watched from the back row of the auditorium, seated quietly, with Miguel at his side. The boy held his hand with pride. On the way out, Miguel asked, "Dad, why were you crying?" Octavio paused for a moment, then answered, "Because I spent my whole life trying to be important, and today I realized I only ever was. When I became your father," that night, the 3 of them had dinner together, a simple meal, rice, beans, onions over steak, and laughter Lots of laughter. Before bed, Miguel asked, "Dad, do you regret anything?" Octavio lay beside him, pulled the blanket up to the boy's chin, and replied, "I regret taking so long to see clearly. But now, I can close my eyes in peace." Silence. "Do you think I'll be a good man, Dad?" "You already are, because a good man isn't the one who has a lot. It's the one who takes care of what he loves. And you already love so much." Miguel smiled. Fell asleep moments later. Octavio stayed there, sitting on the bedroom floor, leaning against the wall, watching his son sleep, thinking that no vault in the world could hold that moment, that no stock market return could match that sleepy little smile. And there, in the silent dark, with his heart full, he whispered to himself, "Some men die owning everything, but never once owned their own heart." Not him. He did dot, and that's why. He was truly alive.